Thank you, Chairman Black, Ranking Member Van Hollen, each of the members of the Budget Committee. Thanks for allowing me to testify today. The Joint Economic Committee is charged with reviewing the economic report of the President and providing an analysis recommendations to you as a budget committee. I'm disappointed that neither President Obama's budget nor the economic report really exhibited any urgency toward addressing our financial challenges in America. In fact, it seemed to me the report laid out government spending as the path to economic growth in this country. They were wrong the past 2 years and have failed. It's time for a new approach. Several months ago, I asked the Republican staff of the Joint Economic Committee to study published economic reports over the last 40 years, looking at America's international competitors who got themselves in trouble with too much debt, what they did to get out of it, and what it did to their economy. On March 15th, the results were published in Spend Less, Owe Less, Grow the Economy, and I would ask, Madam Chairman, this document be entered into the record. Before I summarize its findings, let me show you two charts. On the first chart, let's go another one. That one. Last 40 years in America, we plotted federal growth, which is the next chart is that. Stick with this one. We charted job growth over the last 40 years compared to private, fixed, non-residential investment. All that really means businesses large and small who buy new equipment, new software, new buildings. The correlation between growth in the private sector and private investment is nearly identical. In fact, what this chart shows is that there is no substitute for private investment to spur the economy. Not rebates, not stimulus, not even shovel-ready projects. And I'll make the point further in the next chart. Over the last 40 years, we tracked the size and spending. Let's go back one more. We tracked the size of spending the federal government along with job growth along Main Street. The blue line represents Washington spending. The red line is jobs along Main Street. As you can tell, over the past 40 years, there is no correlation between the two. In fact, there is a negative one. As the government grows, jobs along Main Street shrink. Just the opposite as well. This shows, in fact, that if we continue to spend more as a federal government, our market will continue to shrink. And again, there is no substitute for private investment. The Spend Less, Owe Less, Grow the Economy, it reports that provides clear and convincing evidence that countries that reduce their government budget deficits, and they do it through spending cuts, can boost their economy and job creation in the short term. Respected economists found 21 instances between 1970 and 2007 where 10 of America's international competitors successfully reduced their government debt to GDP ratio by 4.5 percentage points or more, and they did it not by raising taxes, but entirely on spending cuts. For example, here you go, Canada. Neighboring Canada had a very small, less than 1% economic growth as their government spending grew. They shrunk their spending by nearly 13 percentage points of their GDP between 1994 and 2006. As you can tell, they boosted their economic growth from less than 1% to 3.5% over the next 12 years. Sweden, another example of a developed economy like ours, it was actually shrinking in the 1990s, their economy, and after reducing its government spending by over 11 percentage points of GDP, Sweden's negative growth revived to an average of 3.4% annually. New Zealand, another example, lower spending, higher growth. Their spending increased, growth slowed. They got their financial house in order, and growth was restored. So you may say, well, these three countries aren't the United States, but these countries aren't alone. Economists found 26 episodes in 9 developed economies where reducing government budget deficits and debt through spending cuts provide a large boost to economic growth in the first 3 years after their fiscal consolidation began. And perhaps the most important finding is this in this report. While most economists agree that reducing federal spending increases economic growth in the long term, what this report shows is reducing federal spending boosts economic growth and job creation in the short term as well. Here's why. What the report showed was economic growth occurred for 2 reasons. Businesses no longer expecting the government to levy higher taxes on them to pay for excessive spending, they stepped up private investment, buying new buildings, new equipment, new software, and business investment, as we've shown, equals jobs. Secondly, households, no longer facing higher taxes, have higher expectations, and the combination led to purchase more homes and cars. If I am out of time, Madam Chairman, we will summarize the rest and are available for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Mr. Van Hollen?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And look, I want to thank my friend
Yes, how are you,
Congressman
sir?
Brady. Good to see you. Thank you for your testimony. And I've had an opportunity to look at the Republican staff report, the Republican report from the Joint Economic Committee, and you've presented the findings well here. And I don't want to get in debate now. I would just, the only comment I would make is I think you know very well that many economists, and including those who advised the bipartisan fiscal commission that made its recommendations to this Congress that have gotten a lot of discussion, as well as the Rivlin-Domenici commission, both said two things. Number one, yes, we have to reduce our deficits and debt, no doubt about it, in terms of our long-term economic growth. But in the short term, both those bipartisan commissions also said if you cut too fast, too deeply, you will slow down a very fragile recovery and threaten to put people out of work. And, you know, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke, came up with a low estimate the other day in testimony before this House, which was 200,000 jobs would be lost, which he noted is not a trivial number, especially since we just celebrated last month a good jobs report that was a little less than 200,000. So I understand, and I know you do too, that there are lots of ways to look at these things, but I think it's important to put those facts on the table because those are the opinions of a bipartisan group, not just sort of one side of the House. Thank you.
If I may, a couple of thoughts. One, thank you for raising that point, but many of those economists have been wrong. We actually, after going on almost $1 trillion spending spree, we have 2.2 million fewer jobs than when the stimulus began. Mark Zandi, one of the leading economists who say we'll lose jobs if we make some spending cuts, he promised 4 million new jobs by the end of 2010. We actually had 3 million fewer. He was 7 million jobs off. And today we were promised, if we went on the spending spree of the stimulus, that our unemployment rate would be 6.9%. It's time to stop listening to economists who got it wrong and start looking at a proven approach to it. And I will always put in perspective, the spending reductions of this Republican House, $61 billion, represents 4 1,000ths of the U.S. economy. To put it in another perspective, if the economy were the length of the football field, Republican spending reductions are about the length of your shoes. The impact on our economy from those economists, I believe, is wildly exaggerated. Yet the risk of not acting on a financial crisis and bringing the $2 trillion of business investment that's standing on the sidelines today, to me the risk to our economy is to not move with some solid financial rules.
Are there other questions for Mr. Brady?
If I may just follow up,
Sure.
my time.
You're recognized,
And again,
Mr. Van Hollen.
this is not the place for extended debate, and I'm not going to engage you in that debate. I will say that as you know, what we're talking about in the budget cuts is about 12% of the budget, and we're also talking about cuts within a very short period of time, and so that amplifies the impact, which is why those economists have made the statements they are. But I have no further.
And may I just point out,
Sure.
in the economic report, it showed the countries, our competitors with developed economies, who had the greatest success. Their spending cuts were large, credible, and difficult to reverse. So they sent the signal to the market that they could have confidence in reinvesting in business investment again. So I think the Republican model we're taking forward is proven.
All right.
Others?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Questions for the witness?
By the way, thank you all for your service on the committee. You have a big challenge, and I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brady.